Good day, collective listeners. I'm trying out a slightly new intro just to keep it interesting. On today's episode, we have Seth Thomsen from Winthrop University, where he's the director of strength and conditioning. Seth and I met a couple years ago, and slightly stayed in contact. But he's one of those guys who every time you meet up with him, it's like you've been friends forever when you've only met in person a couple times. So really personable guy. I followed him for a long time on social media before that, and I'm sure some of you listeners will be familiar with him from there. But he does a fantastic job with his teams, and he gave me a lot of different quotes, a lot of really good like things that I'm going to steal for my own team. So I think y'all will really appreciate what he has to say, and I think y'all will love listening to it. So thank you as always for listening, and enjoy. What's going on, collective listeners? On today's episode, we have Seth Thomsen, currently working at Winthrop University. He and I met last year, like in person, at a scrimmage that we had. But Seth was like one of the first basketball people I followed on Instagram, especially after I got my basketball job. I was trying to find anybody who was producing any basketball content so I could get better up when you were at Eastern Michigan. So I followed you from there, and they kind of just recognized you from there. So it was good to meet you in person last year. We met up again, had a little scrimmage. I'm not going to talk about the result of that one, but it was good to see you. And thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely, man. That's high praise, but I'm happy to be here.
Oh man, well you deserve it seriously because I remember you posting it and I was like, this is the basketball guy. Now I know, you know. So it was just good to finally put an actual person to the account. So let's start it off. Can you just kind of give me a background of your history and strength and conditioning, and then what kind of brought you to your current position?
Yeah, man. Really kind of goes back to I played Division III basketball. Was a very average player with probably below average basketball IQ. I thought I wanted to be a basketball coach, but when those two things kind of hit me, I realized that I didn't really love basketball like that. I loved the training side of it. So it was cool. I actually got to kind of be our strength coach my senior year because I kind of knew that was the direction I wanted to head. From there, went did a couple internships. Ended up private sector. I was working outsourced kind of to a high school where I was a director at Shenango Forks High School, upstate New York, and then went out, took a leap, took a part time job in Utah, ran out of money, went back, worked at Marshall for about 6 months, and then the women's basketball coach at Utah Valley called me, said the director job is open. We want you to apply for it. So at 25, I went out and was the head strength coach at Utah Valley. Um, Fast forward a few months from there, I got engaged actually, and my fiance was still in New York. So I again kind of took a leap, took an assistant job at Eastern Michigan, where my career kind of developed a lot more. Um, I was men's basketball and volleyball there. I kind of grew into my own a little bit. Spent 3 years there, and that led me to Winthrop now. Going into this is year two, where I'm in charge of men's basketball, volleyball, and our throwing program, and I oversee the department.
Now, I saw something you posted the other day that actually looked pretty cool. It was a combination of your teams, right? It
Mhm.
was basketball and volleyball working together. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? That seemed awesome.
Yeah, our two teams kind of have a pretty close relationship, and basketball and volleyball train very similarly. So, in the weight room, they kind of see them, they see each other doing similar stuff. But kind of what you're referring to is we were promoting our homecoming game, right? And it was one of our basketball guys out on the court learning like how to serve and how to kill and stuff like that. So it was fun to watch those two kind of different teams interact in a little bit unique setting, right? We see them kind of in the weight room together. Sometimes we see them outside, but watching them kind of get out of our one basketball player get out of his comfort zone and try to like learn a completely different skill. You see kind of a different side of those guys when they're super uncomfortable.
No, 100%. And I like the only side I've seen of him is when he's competing.
Hmm.
So it was funny for me to even look at it as a opposing strength coach and see
Hmm.
see the opposite side because like it's so funny because man, I feel like I always have respect for the opponents, right? Like I'm
Mhm.
always going to respect them because for you to get to any level and compete at any collegiate basketball, professional basketball, whatever it is, any type of sport, you have to be skilled, you have to work hard. But like, man, like I'm a competitor, I'm like, I don't like you, I always
Yep.
respect you. Like, and it's just in that moment type deal. And so it's always humbling for me to see too, like those people that we do compete against in their
Mhm.
natural environment and see them as human beings and not competitors on top of that. Cause I know I look like a jerk, man. Like when I'm on the sidelines, I know people would be like, man, I do not mess with that guy. But then if they got to know me, probably change their opinions just a little bit. So it was funny for me to see that.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm very similar, man. I'm kind of stone faced a lot of times, so I feel that for sure.
Yeah. Excuse me. Well, I'm gonna have her edit out this one thing. I gotta clear my throat big time.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh my goodness! All right. All right. No, that's fantastic. And now, one thing that you kind of brought up in the intro that I'm really curious about, if you're willing to be open about it, like you made the comment, like ran out of money, like in that specific environment, like
Mhm.
dude, take me through that time because I feel like a lot of strength and conditioning coaches can kind of gone through the similar process, right? Where they've struggled. There's been a point where it's like if you had quit in that moment, nobody would have blamed you, But obviously, you're still a strength and conditioning coach today. Can you kind of just talk to me about that time a little bit?
Yeah. So I mean, it was pretty close to calling it quits, honestly. And I got out there, and I had a great time. Like I was loving it until I looked at my bank account, right? And I knew it wasn't sustainable. You hear stories about people sleeping in their car, things like that. Like it didn't get to that, but it was pretty close, right? And it was kind of a test of will. Um, I kept getting rejections. I had a couple interviews when I was out there. Uh, didn't get it, didn't get jobs. And then Matt Donaldson, who I credit with a lot of things for my career, kind of saved me. Right, he had just taken over at Marshall as a director there, and he needed a part time uh, assistant, and he wanted somebody that could work with basketball. And kind of that was my background. And their part time situation was a little better. Housing was included and stuff, and it was a little closer to home. So um, he kind of threw me a lifeline, and it was, I credit him with saving my career mainly.
I mean, but that's like it's just so amazing, right? To have somebody who can be there for you and support you in that moment and understand
Mhm.
exactly what you need, right? Like, I mean, I feel like all of us can kind of have those people who are really influential in our careers, but it's harder for me to pinpoint exact moments with my mentors. And I think a lot of people are probably the same. But like for you to have that specific event, I mean, you guys are attached to the hip, I'm sure, for life now.
Absolutely. I mean, he's the director at Queens now, which is in Charlotte, which is 25 minutes from me right now. And part of the reason that I was interested in taking this job when I was in Michigan was to be kind of in the same area as him. We've kind of bounced a lot of ideas off each other over the years, and kind of being in the same area for the first time again in a while has been awesome.
Yeah. Is he working with basketball there?
Yep, yep. He's the
Man,
director there.
man,
He's basketball and volleyball. Yeah,
I got to go against him now. We're App State's coming
absolutely.
up in Queens is like in like sometime mid December, so that's
Yep, yeah.
sucks, man. I want to go up against like you ever seen that fighter? I can't remember. I think it was like Ben Askren or Forrest Griffin or something. And it was like, who are you fighting next? And he's like, I don't know, like hopefully somebody with like a mild sight disorder, like can't eat like that. That's who I want to play
Yeah,
next. So, what were you about to say? Sorry, I cut you
yeah.
off.
No, no, no. We play them this year too. So it'll be my first time playing against him. He always brags about he's got a pretty good record against his former assistants. So I'm trying to get him one in the L column.
Dude, that'd be pretty nice right there. You would get elevated right there amongst the other old
Absolutely.
assistants.
Yep,
Oh
that's
man,
right. Hold it over his head.
yeah, I would never let him forget. I mean, I would just I'd text him every day, be like, "Hey man, how you doing today? By the way, do you remember that game?" Oh,
Absolutely.
that's awesome, and I mean, and I'm sure that speaks to his mentorship as well for you to even
Mm.
consider that in your future move, right? Because to be honest, my decisions have always been about me,
Yeah.
but I think that speaks to your learning capabilities as well, to an understanding how to outsource your ideas. What are kind of the biggest things that you've learned from him as a mentor?
I mean, honestly, the biggest one is how he treated guys and how he built relationships with those guys. I think that's kind of one of the things that I do best. Is build those relationships with the kids that I'm working with. Um, and I kind of learned a lot of that from him. His authenticity and his ability to just like joke with kids and kind of be real with them was pretty awesome to see at 24, kind of new in the field, and I've kind of built it from there. But it stemmed from what I watched with him.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I feel like that relationship aspect is one of the biggest pieces of strength and conditioning, right?
Hmm.
And so to have a good example of that and how to understand that from an early on point in your career is what's going to really benefit you.
Yeah, no doubt. And like I said, it's one of the things that I feel like I do well, right? And you always can get better at those things. That's one of the like soft skills that will never go kind of by the wayside. But it really like if you can't build relationships with guys, then it doesn't really matter what set and rep scheme you're running.
Yeah. No, I know some. I know some of the coaches, the smartest people in the world, and coaching on the floor wasn't really for them.
Hmm.
Because it was very difficult for them to develop those relationships. It's very hard for them
Hmm.
to even pick up on like social cues sometimes and stuff like that. And
Yep.
now, like they're online coaches and they're crushing it because they can take their time to respond, and
Hmm.
they don't have to understand that. So I think that's a good lesson for anybody listening too. Sometimes there are other areas within strength and conditioning that can fit
Hmm.
well. Yeah. Well, my question for you with being the director as well. I mean, that's a pretty
Hmm.
tough thing to handle. Being the director, working with a really involved sport like basketball, volleyball is another premier sport. How do you
Hmm.
balance working with all of these teams?
Yeah, man, you said it. The kind of general neediness of those sports, in a lot of ways, can be tough. It really comes down to having some really good sport coaches that are understanding. Now they're demanding; they want their things done well, obviously, but they kind of allow me to make a schedule or make adjustments to the schedule that kind of works for everybody. Um, I've had to kind of learn to be a little bit more organized and kind of prioritize things a little bit differently. And this year's been much better. That first year coming into it, you don't really know kind of how things used to run, how you want to run them. You kind of just hit the ground running, and try to make it work on the fly. Second year, we kind of dial things in, take a step back, look at it from a little bit, zoomed out view. I was able to kind of shift some teams around. Last year, I had, a lot of obligations and a lot of different teams. This year, I kind of honed in on just my kind of three main sports, but that takes, sport coaches that I was working with to be understanding, to be like, hey, we're going to get an assistant now. We're not working with the director, but that's going to allow us to get more time with our strength coach because he's not pulled in five different directions, right? I might be working with an assistant, but he might only have three teams. So I'm going to get him at practice now. And for me, like, I love being on the floor. I love coaching, but I also know that I want to be at practice. I want to see those guys and those volleyball girls at practice playing their sport, right? It helps me kind of program different. What do we need? What is this kid? Why is he not on the floor? Right? If he can't move laterally, it doesn't matter. If his trap bar deadlift goes up, if he can't move laterally, that's the reason he's not getting on the court. Let's dial in on some specific stuff, right? And you can't see that if you're just in the weight room. Um, so it's tough at times because you are kind of pulled in different directions, but it is also tough to work on the system when you're kind of bogged down by the system. So being able to kind of to back out and see things, reassess every day, has been huge for us, and really moving the department forward, not just moving our individual teams forward.
What was it? When did that process occur for you? I love that quote. Can you say that for me one more time? It's tough to be in the system.
It's
Sorry.
it, it's tough to work on the system when you're bogged down by the system.
It blew my mind. I literally couldn't even remember it 3 seconds after hearing it, but I love that quote, man. What was that process like to kinda, like, take that step back? Was that over the summer when you had some more free time, or
Mhm.
was it just, like, a really, like, a needs basis type thing?
Yeah, I mean, it was mainly over the summer, because we were able to obviously really slow down. All of our teams were home for that month or so before the basketballs came back, um, and so my assistant and I kind of took our time in reevaluating kind of what we want this to look like. And it's not just, you know, a team gets 3 sessions a week, get them in and out, like check the box and we're good, right? We want to actually make an impact and help these teams get better, right? Keep kids healthy, improve performance, all that, like that we preach about all the time, but like, were we actually doing it, or were we actually just having kids come in for sessions and checking the box?
Yeah, it's so solid of a point too because they're not going to listen to you if you do have this kind of surface level relationship.
Mhm.
I mean, like in that, those conversations where I feel like I've made the most headway as a coach have been based off of me being around as much as possible. And it's because we developed this relationship because they know, like I care about them, they care about me, they care about getting better, right?
Mhm.
And so, like, I think in those conversations, things have been revealed to me that they probably would have been comfortable sharing before. Like we've had some weight loss guys,
Mhm.
and they come in on Monday. Every weight loss guy is going to be heavy on Mondays, myself included. Okay,
Yep.
and I'm
Absolutely.
like, man, what would the weekend look like? And if it was a situation where they just came into the weight room just for those 3 sessions and then left, conversation would have been, man, I don't know. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a chance the athlete would have been open with you, but I think this is the same player who last year we have walkthroughs the night before, and like our coach was like, dude, don't come to this. There's no need. And I was like, well, I'm going to do everything. Like I'm not going to be a 90% type of guy. And so
Sure.
I went to the walkthrough, and that same player last year was like, he's like joking in front of the whole team. He's like, man, you're dedicated to your craft, CA, and like just making a joke, but like there's behind every joke is some truth.
Mhm.
And so we had those open conversations, and it was conversations about like, yeah, to be honest, I did go out this weekend, and I hit cookout at 2 a.m. And it's like, well, like here's the deal. I'm not gonna you're a college athlete. I'm not gonna tell you can't go out, right? But how about the no cookout at the end? And then
Mhm.
just making small tweaks and changes and things that could kind of help us out a little bit. So to your point of going to practice and being around to develop those relationships, that's going to be one of the biggest pieces. And especially,
Mhm.
I don't know if you've noticed the same thing. Like when the coaches, like you said, the structure was set up, you weren't really able to go to practice. The coaches prior to me as well weren't really able to go. And so I think like the first time I was at practice and they were like, "Oh, he's not here for 10 minutes," and then just leaving. Like the players, like it kind of like it jolted them a little bit. They were really shocked. I don't know. Did you have the same experience?
Yeah, man. Coaches or players, I'm sorry, players notice that, right? They know when we're around, when we're not around, if it's more than just that in and out session, right? I definitely noticed that when we were here. I think situation was different. The assistant before me worked with men's basketball, so they had a little bit more time. So I don't think it was as much of a shock when I was kind of at practice or not at practice, but um, at least at the coaches, but the players noticed for sure. And I had a number of players who were new to the program this year who asked like if I traveled with them, little stuff like that. Like we don't do, in all honesty, when when we travel, like how much are we really doing? But they notice that when we're there, right? We do probably enough to make an impact on the road, whatever that may be in your kind of role. But they notice when you're around.
Well, it's time on the front end to me, right? Because maybe you are traveling. That's a lot of time where you're not really doing stuff. But maybe a player comes up to you and says, "Hey, man, my hips are tight. Is there something
Mhm.
we can do?" Because you're just sitting around, you got time, right? And then all of a sudden, you get that person to buy into mobility and just a little bit more, and then that kind of leaks into the other players. Like, what I notice is every open like mobility hour, there's usually one person extra. Like they kind of
Mhm.
keep grabbing something and bring them in. So I think that's the only fair point. And sometimes I'll trust me. I go on travel trips. I'm like, damn, bro, I just did a warm up and clapped really hard.
Mhm.
And that was about
Yep.
it. But there's been benefits to it as well too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. No question.
One question I have for you on that too, like you did bring up that point of the previous staff, and I think it's so hard
Mhm.
not to compare yourself to the previous staff or how they did things, or like because when I first got here, I'm like, man, so what did Coach do here? What did this look like? What was feedback he got? Because I'm just trying to get like the best result possible,
Mhm.
but I felt like I was getting too caught up in what was happening in the past. How did you kind
Mhm.
of avoid that, and then how did you, especially as a director, kind of make it your own style?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always try to, not tear down what had already been done, right? For better or worse, like it could have been completely different to what I believe in. But not knowing the situation fully, I try not to judge too much, and just kind of slowly build my own. They had a pretty solid culture in the weight room. Obviously, here, culture basketball wise has been pretty strong long before me, but they had a solid culture in the weight room. And so it was just trying to build on that, right? And slowly kind of laying my own kind of ground rules, I guess, with certain things, but then being very direct up front with this is how we do it now, right? Um, and there's a lot of gray area in a lot of that, right? So it might be, we have a 5 minute rule in the weight room. Like if we're lifting at 12, you're here, shoes tied, ready to go at 11:55. That was significantly different than what they had done in the past. But there might be some other things that I kind of let slide as long as our kind of big rocks are in place.
I think that's totally fair, and I'm fortunate. I never had to have the on time conversation because
Mhm.
our the previous coach was really big on it. So every time they're there 10 minutes early, and I'm like, all right, great, check
Mhm.
the box. All right, we're good.
Love it.
So,
Yep.
but I mean, I think that's a big piece of it too, is kind of establishing not even necessarily rules, but I would say more like non-negotiables. Like
Mhm.
this is part of my process. What are some more of your non-negotiables? What are the things that like to you are essential to your program?
Yeah, I think that our reps are our reputation, right? So what we're able to get our kids to do, and there's some bandwidth in there, right? A squat isn't a squat for everybody; it looks a little different, but being able to get kids in good positions, I want to be very technically proficient, right? I want things to look a certain way, again within that bandwidth. On top of that, like I crave consistency. I want you to show up every day with the same energy, the same attention to detail, ready to go. You're allowed to have bad days once in a while, right? But I want you locked in on whatever it is we're doing consistently every day. I don't want you, you know, jacked up, ready to go on Monday, and I got to kick you in the pants to get you going on a Tuesday, right? I want you the same guy every day.
No, and that's exactly it. Because your average out is just going to be
Mhm.
mediocre, right? It could be great and then bad, and then it's just going to be an okay
Yeah.
average. And it just reminds me of one time where uh, I was given my non-negotiables talk, right? Like one of my things, and 100%. One is mine: give you 100% of your effort every day.
Mhm.
You know, like just give
Mhm.
me 100% every day, and we're
Mhm.
good. And like it's implied in in like that, like maybe your 100% isn't 100% today, but if you got
Right.
70%, give me all 70%.
Mhm.
Just be where your feet are essentially. And I remember
Yeah.
somebody asked a question and kind of like was like, well, what if I'm not 100%? And as soon as I heard that question, I was like, we're gonna butt heads a little bit. I can already
Uh-huh.
tell. We had
Yep.
we had a great relationship, but there were some days where I was like, this ain't even 20%,
Mhm.
but
Yep. Yep.
it just brings that back to me, and I kind of brings me to my next question. Like, have you ever had anybody buck back on these, or have you ever had anybody kind of struggle to fit into these non-negotiables, and how did you approach that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think with a lot of teams, you have guys who are going to test the limits, right? They're going to see how far they can go, see what they can get away with. But I think it goes back to what we talked about before with relationships, and then being very clear up front. Like this is the standard. This is how we do things. Um, I was brought in for a reason. You were brought in for a reason. Like your reason is to play basketball at a high level. I'm just trying to help you do those things. And if it gets to a point, like we can go have a talk with coach. That's fine. It never has come to that. Fortunately, I might just be lucky. Maybe I've worked with some good guys that they kind of understand that I'm here to help them. I'm not just here to be like big tough guy because I'm not. But it really comes down to being able to talk to them on their level, whatever that is, right? And just break things down and be like, "Yeah, man, like we're squatting for a reason or we're sprinting, doing this for a reason. It's not just because I want to be a power lifter. I want you to be a better athlete and I want to help you, whether it's in the weight room, on the court, in life, whatever. I want to help you kind of take that next step and handle your business the way you should."
For sure, I think that upfront piece is really big. And
Mhm.
just outlining the expectations from the start. I've never, I haven't had anybody really, really, truly kind of,
Mhm.
I've butted heads with on those non-negotiables that I've had. And like my thing is always establishing that deep level of care. Like I care about you,
Mhm.
like more than anything. And I'm sure I've said on this podcast before too. Like even if I didn't like care about you as a person, like I have to care about you as an athlete or else I get fired. So like
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
the like I care about you no matter what. I have no choice. Unless I'm trying to get fired, and that's a completely different conversation.
Right.
So like if that is established, then why would I ask you to do something that I don't think is gonna help?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. And I heard a quote a while back, and it's not in our job description to give up on a kid, right? We might not like the kid, in all honesty. Like they might, we might butt heads every day, right? But it's not in our job description to let them, slip below the standard or bring the rest of the team down, right? We are in a role that is to build everyone up, right? In a sense. Um, and I don't think that I can come to work every day and not try to make people better,
Yeah. No,
regardless of how I feel about you, maybe as a person.
and I think that's completely fair, and that's how teams work, though, right? Because I mean,
Mhm,
certain teammates don't like each other sometimes, but
mhm,
if they can put that aside as soon as they step on the court, then they can work together, right?
mhm.
And usually those people are the ones who end up kind of reaching back out later on and saying,
Right.
"I appreciate you," because you're probably one of the
Mhm,
first people in their lives who have ever actually held to that standard over and over and over again. Because that's probably why we're having this issue right now.
mhm.
Is maybe people in the position of authority in the past have said kind of given up a little bit on it, or said, I'll let this slide because I just don't want to deal with it today.
Mhm.
And then that just allows them to kind of perpetuate those behaviors. So
Mhm.
I like that quote a lot. You give me a lot of stuff I can name the episode for, and I really appreciate it because, I mean, we've got bogged down by the system. We got reps or reputation. I mean, we got a lot of good quotes. So you're helping me out on that
I
end.
got you, man. I got you.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. I got a question for you
Right. Right.
because this is a failure I've made before,
Mhm,
and so I'm curious to see. We talked about the importance of mentorship, right? And your
mhm,
mentor threw you a lifeline, and it really helped you. You know, you have an assistant strength coach with you now. I don't know
mhm,
your relationship really at all. I didn't even know you had an assistant strength coach. So if it's a different type of deal, you can just tell me up front. But I think one of the things I fail at is understanding that it's my job to also mentor younger strength coaches and help them and really not. I think I can get lost in sometimes of like, well, I didn't really get help that much in this specific area, but then forget that I got help way more in another area. What are
mhm.
some things that you're doing to help mentor maybe your assistant, maybe some other younger strength coaches that have reached out or that you've worked with?
Yeah, I'll talk more about kind of our GA.
Yeah.
He's another former basketball player um, that he actually interned with us last year. Did a really good job, and we brought him on as our GA. Um, Kind of my biggest thing is letting him learn kind of on the fly, right? I help with our lacrosse, like return to play kids. So I'm in some of his sessions, but I try to be kind of in the back where he's not really aware that I'm there. Obviously, he knows I'm there, but I want him to feel comfortable kind of making decisions on his own and making mistakes on his own, really, because that's how a lot of us learned, right? Is as we try something, it didn't work. It's okay, cool, correct next time. Where I'll kind of step in is if I see him not correcting those mistakes, like session in and session out. If it goes on for a while, then I'll kind of try to nudge him in the right direction, and then being very honest. Like he'll ask me about his programming or ask me what can he do better in this situation, and not just sugarcoating stuff just to make him feel good, right? Like he's asking me that because he wants to get better. So I'm gonna try to be honest with him and tell him up front, like, this is how I would handle it. This is how I've seen it handled in other situations. Like you got to find your own voice, but this is kind of what I would do, and let him kind of take it from there, without trying to make him like a clone of me. I don't think that's good for anybody, right? I want to kind of help nudge him in the right direction, but not make him, you know,
I
make him
uh,
better.
I try not to joke on this, but everybody always laughs, and I'm being dead serious. Like I
Hmm.
always preface it with like, I hope you understand this is my personal opinion. This is not me as right or wrong. I'm like, but I think this is stupid, and then we'll kind
Hmm.
of go into this,
Hmm.
But I that's just what you when you bring up being a clone. I try to preface like you can have different opinions from me.
Hmm.
I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm still making mistakes. So you don't have to be my exact copy, but I just I love the one aspect you talk about of helping him understand it's important to correct things, and especially if it is happening from session to session,
Hmm.
because man, it's uncomfortable when you first start coaching. Like it would be physically painful for me to go up and be like, hey, maybe you should point your toes out a little bit more in your squat
Hmm.
and think about keeping your chest up, like because I'm just like like they're gonna think I'm critiquing
Hmm.
them, but like ultimately, like all you're doing is really helping their safety, and you're
Hmm.
helping them get better, But I, I I love that you focus on that with your kind of mentorship aspect because I mean that was a big struggle for me, and I see it almost like with every new strength coach that really comes in. I don't know if you've seen the same.
Yeah, absolutely. and I don't know, if it's insecurity, if it's like you're saying, just like kind of apprehension to make kids think that you're just critiquing them. But again, like I'll keep going back to this. Like if you have a relationship with that kid, they know that you're only telling them to fix it because you want them to be better, right? To not get hurt, to actually improve what we're trying to get out of the weight room. So if you only talk to them the 3 times that you're critiquing him in a session and not any other time, like that's where you're gonna have those issues, and they're gonna think of you as just the guy who tries to fix everything and not the guy who actually cares about what's going on.
That's really solid background to that too, right? It is,
Mhm.
there can be critiques within it, and I think like when the moment kind of dawned for me when I was like, man, like the person who's critiqued me the most in my life is my mom. And do I still love my mom? Like, yes.
Mhm.
So like, and has she helped me out a lot? Yes. So realistically, I should probably be okay with kind of just
Mhm.
saying a couple small cues. And for anybody who's listening who is struggling with that, I've never once had an athlete kind of like turn to me and just be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Or get upset or have it ruin our relationship.
Mhm.
So I love that you focused on that point. Uh, one thing too that I kind of wanted to ask you about, and this is advice
Mhm.
for me, right?
Okay.
You were a former basketball player,
Mhm.
and then now working in basketball. I was not. I've established endlessly on this podcast how bad I am actually at basketball. And so to myself and other coaches who haven't necessarily worked with the sport that they're, or played the sport that they're working with, what would be some advice that you'd have for those coaches?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say get out and watch the sport as much as possible, whether that's practice, games, play it if you can. I don't know how much that really helps at this at this point in your career, but watch it as much as you can, and then talk to coaches and talk to your athletes. How these guys move very strangely. Some of them, right? They have long femurs, long arms. Traditional weight room exercises don't always look awesome, right? Um, but if you can find a way to like understand the movement of the game, I think that's going to help your programming, because the last thing we want to do is just throw a bunch of weight on whatever exercise, and then they hop off the bar and their back hurts, right? That's with any sport, but you're dealing with some very unique frames. So if you can kind of understand how that individual moves, I think that can really help influence some of your programming.
Yeah, and I think your point of playing the sport too matters because I mean I'll tell you this much: when I play pickup basketball, I'm like, damn, I need to go through some conditioning myself because
Yeah.
I'm 1 minute in and I'm literally hitting my inhaler while we're in transition. Like this happened to me before, so I think that has helped me recognize it. But I mean, all the basketball people I've spoken with, and then once I kind of took a broader view of it and a broader lens of it. Uh, all the really good strength coaches I speak with watch the sport as much as possible,
Mhm.
and they understand the movements and they understand what goes behind it. And I think it's just been so interesting to me because I feel like at a kind of like when earlier point in my career when I was like, how much we really need to watch the sport because I know what it's like. I know what the movements are like over and over again.
Mhm.
I know what the main movements are going to be. I know for basketball, we're going to need to move in all three planes.
Mhm.
Well. So, but what does that really truly mean? Like, unless you understand the game of basketball, and so. My joke I always tell is like, if we were talking about 5 on 5 shell, I would have thought it was about turtles. But I've understood basketball more, and it's definitely made me a better coach.
Mhm.
And what's been so interesting to me is the more I understand it, the more I can relate it to the court as well too,
Mhm.
and the more I can say things. Like on a dumbbell step up, it's like yeah, we're driving straight off the ground. Okay, if I'm going for a counter movement jump, okay, it's
Mhm.
it's like exactly like you're going for a rebound, or
Yep.
if it's a repeat jump, okay, you missed the board, but you got to go right back up and get it. What's that going to look like? I'm sure your vocab and your ability to express that's a little bit better than mine, but it certainly helped me to watch it as much as possible.
Mhm.
Do you
And I
watch film?
think
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'd love to hear.
and I think like I said, like the weight room, being able to pick movements and stuff in the weight room is super important. But I think a lot of kind of my basketball specific stuff, quote unquote, if you want to call it that, happens more like on the court with a
Mm,
lot of our like change of direction. agility type work in the summer, especially in our speed work. That stuff looks a lot more kind of specific to what we're going to do on the court than maybe our traditional weight room work. We're hitting a lot of like curve sprints, a lot of reactionary change of direction and stuff because basketball is a game of change of direction, right? We'll hit top end speed stuff, but a lot of our stuff is acceleration. Because if you watch, like, I mean, anybody can see this. Anybody probably already knows this. Is we're not hitting true top end speeds on a basketball court. There's way too much, or not not enough space, way too much deceleration. So we work a lot of that deceleration, change of direction stuff in there over kind of our top end speed type stuff.
Do you still do the top end speed stuff though for like the speed reserve
Mhm.
kind of action
Yep.
of it? Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Um,
We'll touch it. We'll touch it, but it's not a priority as much as maybe it was a few years ago for me.
yeah.
My kind of philosophy has changed a little bit on that, but yeah, we'll still touch it.
Yeah, only top end speed if it's like Malice at the Palace, and
Right.
you're going from the opposite side. Uh,
Yeah,
my top end speed training is running routes. That's what we always do,
I love it. I
and
love it.
it's awesome. And then one time I made the mistake of trying to defend it, and I mean one of our players I've never been hit that hard, and I played football for 8 years,
Yeah.
like I got cracked, and I was like, all right,
Uh,
this will never happen again,
yeah.
and that's just me
Yeah.
finding out I'm not nearly as athletic and my athletic reserve was already low. So for me
Sure.
to get older and stop doing athletic stuff,
Mhm.
we're at a pretty bad point. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
And so I really think that's interesting to focus on that agility aspect. I mean, a lot of coaches do it in the summer, but I also kind of hear the argument, well, a lot of it's done within the sport itself, right? And doing
Mhm.
it with on the actual court. What's your philosophy by adding in that extra agility work on top of what they already get on the court? I'm just curious to see
Mhm.
what your belief is on that.
Yeah. In the summer, we do a lot of like individual skill work. We don't do as much live team stuff. So I like to add that to kind of fill that bucket while we're not really getting a ton of it. Because we'll do a lot of like 2-on-0, very small group type stuff. So we're not getting a ton of that through practice. Now, throughout the season, we've started to add it to our warm up pre practice as just kind of more like competition type stuff, just to kind of get them juiced up before we go and go into whatever drill it is. And that kind of coach loves juice here. So he wants guys yelling and screaming. So that's not really me. So kind of trying to trick the guys almost into like, hey, we're gonna compete. You're gonna be loud. You're gonna make the guy feel bad if you beat him. Like, uh, we're gonna kind of microdose our speed work and kind of sneak it in there as part of our warm up, part of a competition. But we're really kind of hitting some of that in that warm up.
No, that's great, and I agree with you. I think it's a needs based thing for your team, right?
Hmm.
Like we don't like on almost every basketball team I've worked with. There's not a ton of defensive emphasis in the summer,
Hmm.
and that's really where you get a lot of your lateral work in.
Yeah.
So obviously, at that point, I think it's important to kind of fill that bucket, like you were saying. And like it's fun too because I love seeing the testing numbers go up. I make a big deal out of the combine. Like we do the combine,
Hmm.
and it's like, realistically, are any of our players going to be able to go and get invited to the combine? It's probably going to be a different path for them.
Hmm.
But one, if they ever do, I want to make damn sure that they're as prepared as possible for the combine because that's an amazing day, and I hope you
Hmm.
absolutely crush every single test. But two, they pick those tests for a reason, right? Because you can
Hmm.
see specific things. So I think that's what's helped me is adding in that agility work. So on our lane agility, all of a sudden their numbers are
Hmm.
getting better, and it's not even because they got faster necessarily. It's because they've learned how to be more efficient and they
Hmm.
learn how to be more aware of their body within space. But then that gets them to buy into the weight room more. I'm in the same camp as you. I think over the summer it's really essential to do that agility work. Especially for prepping tendons, prepping your whole
Hmm.
body to actually go into full time practices because if anybody's not familiar with basketball, the typical trend is as soon as it hits September 26th, 27th, 28th, you're going from 45 to hour sessions to 2.5 hours, like
Hmm.
that overnight. There definitely has to be some prep work.
Yeah, no doubt. It is a beast that switch overnight, man. If you're not prepared for it, it'll break you.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But luckily, I learned after my first year that we should probably prep just a little bit more. yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
Well, one thing I'm curious about too is the balance between volleyball and basketball. It is very similar to the train sports. I'm in the camp too that I don't really think you have to put in a lot of sports specific stuff, like you're saying
Mhm.
within the weight room. I think a lot of my training it would stay the same. Like I've got women's golf, and we do a lot of same stuff for basketball.
Mhm.
Uh, but my question is more on that relationship aspect side. How do you balance your time between the two so that one team doesn't feel like the stepchild? I've seen it happen before with me, so I'm curious how you go about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, fortunately, here our schedules are kind of opposite ends of the day. So, like volleyball will lift in the morning, and basketball will lift and practice in the afternoon, and then volleyball practices after them. So, I'll kind of be wherever each team is, right? So I'm obviously lift in the morning, and then I got a little break, and then I see our basketball guys, and then I'm at practice with them, and then I basically jump right into seeing our volleyball girls, and it's trying to whenever they're on campus or in the Coliseum, I'm around, I'm available, and it's like you're saying, like you don't ever want one of those teams to feel like they're less important than the other. So kind of meeting each individual kid where they're at, and being available for whatever they need. Right.
Yeah,
Um, Obviously, basketball is pretty needy. Anywhere you go, like that's going to be who's asking the most of you. I would argue at least. So having an understanding of coach wants this from basketball, volleyball needs this, like what is the priority at this moment, right? And it's different every day.
yeah,
Um, but it's being available more than anything.
yeah. No, I think that's a great point. Now, my follow up question to that though is, how do you stay fresh yourself, right? Because that's
Mhm,
a lot of time spent on other people.
mhm. Yeah, that was one of the things last year. We talked about how I was getting pulled in a ton of different directions, and you can't pour from an empty cup. So, kind of taking that step back not only helped me, I guess time wise in here, but my wife was kind of getting the brunt of it. Like I was never home, um, so being able to be home a little more and be with her, be with our dogs, and kind of recharge, and be where my feet are, right? So if I'm home, like I don't want my computer with me. I don't want to work on work when I'm home. And when I'm here, like I'm locked in here so that I can be the best coach, best person for these coaches and athletes. Um, but you know, being home is kind of important to me, right? Being with my wife, with our families and stuff is huge for me. So when it's time to do that, like it's time to shut work off as much as I can.
Yeah, and there's always things you can't control. You'll get a text,
Mhm,
every once in a while, but I like the aspect of not bringing the computer home either. Like,
mhm,
I remember the first time I left my laptop at work. Like, my fiance was like she didn't say it, but just the happiness that was like exuded
mhm,
off her. Because dude, it's so easy just to like go home and be like, man, what could be, it'd be great for me tomorrow is if I did all this pre stuff, and
mhm,
I just got it done. I got all the stuff I didn't want to do tomorrow, got it done right at home. And then it's like
mhm,
8 o'clock, and it's like I'm physically here, but like how much have I
mhm,
mentally been here? How much have I like actually asked about her day? How much have I checked in with her? And stuff grinds on the relationship.
mhm,
Like I'm very fortunate that she understands, but like again, like you inspire me. I'm leaving my laptop at home today. I'm not gonna bring my book bag home, because like that's where I notice like she's the happiest, right? Is when
mhm.
and it's just like a small thing that kind of is like a signal of like I'm here. I'm not.
Yep,
I'm not gonna be focused on work. Yeah.
yep. Yeah, and my wife's a teacher, man. So if anybody, knows about being drained from
Yeah.
pouring into other people, it's teachers. So we're kind of getting it from both ends. So it's been a bit of a learning process for both of us and trying to kind of curb that and like I said before, be where our feet are and when we're home, be home. So
Yeah. What kind of dogs do y'all have?
we have a Labradoodle and a Weimaraner.
That's
Most people
awesome.
don't know what the second one is. So
I know for sure.
I love it.
Do they have the eyes like the
Mhm.
eyes that can tell every secret you've ever
Oh yeah.
had?
Yep.
It's so funny too because like I don't have kids, but I have
Mhm.
two dogs as well,
Mhm.
and so it's like they're like like as I'm sure every listener who has kids is like, you guys don't even know. But like when I would go home, it's like, man, I want to hang out with my dogs too. Like
Mhm.
those are part of the family. So I totally
Absolutely.
understand that piece. I appreciate you saying, I want to go home with the wife and the dogs because I was looking
Mhm.
at my dog. October is the worst month.
Mhm.
It's got to be for you too. I mean, especially volleyball ending their season,
Mhm.
trying to get that final push, and then basketball ramping it up. Like that's hours.
Mhm.
And I was like looking at my dogs like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, man, I barely recognize y'all. Like I got to be,
Yeah.
home more. So I get that. I appreciate you bringing up the
Yeah.
dogs for sure.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Seth, dude, thank you so much for coming on, dude. I really appreciate you. You were one of the first strength coaches. Very very open to speak with me, especially like
Mhm.
even I know it's a scrimmage environment, but still, I've had a lot of coaches, especially at the at previous schools I've been at, who like I'm like, hey, nice to meet you, and they're like, yeah, all right. And then they kind of just move about their day. So
Mhm.
I wanted to bring somebody genuine on. I know who I knew would do a great job. So I think you crushed it. And thank you so much for coming on, man.
Hey, man, it was a pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And then last thing, anybody
Mhm.
who wants to reach out to you, anybody who wants to follow you on social media like I do, where can they best reach you?
Yeah, I'm a little bit less active on Instagram now than I was, but that is S Thompson 20, Thomsen, spelled a little different. And then my Twitter is Coach S Thompson. So those are
Awesome.
probably the best two. Pretty active on there. So
Perfect. Perfect. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
yes, sir. Thank you.